Okay, Erev Tov. So the previous time we met, we spoke about actually a few times about things that people say about the reform movement, maybe a little bit about conservative, and how what kernel of truth there might be in it, but in any case, it's overdone, exaggerated, not accurate. But now we're going to discuss a much more rigorous halachic discussion about attitudes, possible attitudes to within Orthodox psak, Orthodox rabbinate, towards reform and conservative. And we're going to start with a pretty extensive list of tshuvot of Rav Moshe Feinstein, who leads the way, who leads the attitude that's generally accepted in Orthodox circles, and it's very severe and very strict. I'm saying from the start, and then we're going to discuss, is this the only option or can there be another option? And I might be looking for some words in English, but I tried as much as I could to prepare. We'll see. Maybe I have it already. Maybe I'll ask for help along the way. Here we go. Moshe Feinstein, first of all, defines people who are reform and conservative. In Hebrew, he would call them apikosim or kofrim. I would say heretics. I looked up one translation I looked up used the term blasphemer, and their rabbis, the leaders, would be called mumarim leachis umasitim umadichim. Mumar leachis means the following. You are a sinner, you perform sins, but then there are two kinds. There are people who do that because of comfort. That's called in the halacha, mumar leteavon, meaning you eat something not kosher because you're hungry, not because you want to eat something not kosher. Whereas people who are sinners, but for being, there's no good word for this in English, for being dafka against, those are called mumar leachis. They're doing it to just
be contrary. Wow.
Sorry?
No, contrary.
Yeah,
I know.
They're being, what would you call it? They're being intentionally aggressive. Not necessarily aggressive towards people, but they're being intentionally against something.
Right.
The classic example is if you have two restaurants, one next to the other, the person who is mumar leteavon, who is a sinner because this is his desire. If there's kosher food, he'll eat the kosher food. If there isn't kosher food, he won't refrain. He won't have patience, and he will eat the non-kosher food. But he's not dafka looking to eat non-kosher food. So if you have a kosher establishment next to a non-kosher one, I'll go to the kosher one. Mumar leachis means even though there's a kosher establishment next door, he'll go to the non-kosher establishment. He's doing it dafka. So Moshe Feinstein calls reform and conservative people mumarim leachis, and I would say the rabbis actually using this about the rabbis, and he says that they are masitim umadichim. Masitim umadichim is a term in halacha from the written Torah itself about a person who incites in Sefer Dvarim. There are a few halachot brought together. One of them is about a person who performs avodah zarah, and the other is about a person who is masit umadiach. He incites other people to perform avodah zarah, and this is what Rav Moshe Feinstein uses as a term to call the rabbis, that they are like masitim umadichim. Not enough that they themselves act in this way, they cause other people to act in this way. He does not recognize their actions. He doesn't have a written responsum, a written tshuva, which is given logical reasoning, but to call them a certain name, calls them in the tshuvot in Hebrew, he calls them rabbi, not harav, not rabbanim, rabbi, reish aleph bet yud yud. In English, since an Orthodox rabbi would be called rabbi, so he calls them conservative rabbis, reform rabbis, and so on. In Hebrew, he uses the term rabbi, and Rav Moshe Feinstein's attitude has been widely accepted in Orthodox circles in Israel. And you'll see Israeli rabbis and Orthodox people relating to non-Orthodox rabbis and calling them, using that term in Hebrew, rabbi, ha-rabbis, ha-rabbaim. And the reason is because they want to distinguish between someone whom they respect and call harav, and someone who they don't respect and they call him a rabbi, meaning we are against these people. Interesting note, someone wrote about Rav Soloveitchik's daughter, who was married, two daughters. One was married, is widowed, was married to Rav Moshe, to Aaron Lichtenstein, Rosh Yeshiva of Gush of Har Etzion. The other was married to Rabbi Dr. Twersky in Boston, I believe.
I know.
Yeah.
I Rabbi Twersky. She wasn't the one, his wife. Go ahead.
Atara. And Atara said she noticed her father exchanging letters with a conservative rabbi in English and not in Hebrew. And she asked him why he writes to this conservative rabbi in English and not in Hebrew. And he said that because when he writes in English, this is very interesting. When he writes in English, he can call him rabbi because it's not disrespectful to call him rabbi when you're writing in English. In Hebrew, he didn't want to call him Arav because he didn't want to show him that respect, but he didn't want to call him in Hebrew rabbi to be disrespectful. So he only wrote to him in English where he could use the term rabbi and not be unusually respectful and or unusually disrespectful. Which is an interesting decision to make, so that you keep darchei shalom, a term that he used or she used in his name, and found a way around the tricky kind of situation, which is different than Rav Moshe Feinstein writing in Hebrew and calling consistently using the term in Hebrew rabbi. Rav Moshe Feinstein is against giving them aliyot, giving the rabbis aliyot. If you hear a bracha, said you don't say amen if you don't give them the honor of making a bracha at a chuppah, or any other kibudim, any other show of respect in shul, like Hagbaha, Glila, taking out the sefer from the Aron. He uses the pasuk in Bemidbar, Velo tachanifu et haaretz. The sefer Bemidbar, towards the end, the perek before last, Sefer Bamidbar says about bloodshed, about spilling blood, that it is machanif et haaretz, it causes tum'ah, it causes impurity to the land, it makes the Shekhinah, it kind of pushes the Shekhinah away from us, from being with us in the land. But it is used, as it is used in modern Hebrew, lehit chanef. I did not find a word for this in English, but it's like hypocritically showing someone respect. I don't really respect you. Ani mitchanef elecha. I'm making a show of being respectful. What? That may be, but I have no idea what that word is. Eliezer is saying what? Obsequiate. Okay, if you say so, I believe you. I'm not promising to remember.
It's usually for somebody in a high position that you're sort of bowing down before them.
Okay, so there is a principle of not doing this to someone who is a sinner, meaning if you're just being nice to the person because you want to make a show of being nice, but we don't really respect them because they're sinners, so don't do that. So be strong, be a strong representative of Torah and of halacha and yirat shamayim, and show them that you oppose what they're doing, and don't make believe that you're respectful of them. That's the idea of velo tachanifu et haaretz. This is a term Rav Moshe uses in regard to not giving kibudim to non-Orthodox rabbis, because we don't want to make believe that we're being as if tachanifu et haaretz. But I have to make a note of this. He does say that if you have to show them honor, because there could be a reason why it would be necessary, and that is if you, in a case if you don't, that will cause a big machloket, and also there is a fear of losing monies that go to tzedakah, meaning not I will lose, my salary will be lowered, but money that is given for purposes of mitzvah, that's one reason, and machloket is another reason. When I see this, I ask myself, when is it not machloket? Meaning that this is a main issue that we'll get back to later on. But I'm saying even Rav Moshe Feinstein, he didn't say what I'm saying. He didn't say it's always going to cause a machloket. So obviously he says, even if it causes a machloket, I stand behind all these psakim that I gave, all these decisions that I gave. But at the same time, there is a certain level of machloket at which I would say, okay, we're going to draw the line here and not create a rift, a very strong rift in the community that we're not going to do. So have that in mind. He doesn't trust their kashrut. Their kiddushin are not valid, and their gitin are not valid. And this is very important as far as the issue of mamzerim, because if he would recognize their kiddushin, and then they wouldn't get divorced, or if they would get divorced, then the get wouldn't be valid, and then they would go to find another mate. Then children from the second, what would you call it? Joining of these two people, the children would be mamzerim. So that's one consideration why this might have even influenced this psak. And also there is a difference in some cases between early tshuvot of Rav Moshe Feinstein in the 60s and later tshuvot like in the 70s, apparently because the movements were on the move. They were becoming more liberal and enabling more things, as we've described before. And therefore the opposition, the level of opposing, of his opposition to them became stronger, and sometimes where he was more lenient and more, I wouldn't say soft, but not as harsh. In the earlier years, may have become more strict in later years. Mark has joined us. It's okay. And I'll just give you a little bit of the background. We're discussing Rav Moshe Feinstein, the leading Orthodox authority in the United States, in North America, and in all of the Jewish world until his passing in the early 80s. And he was a major figure in being very strict in a lot of halachic decisions against Reform and conservative people and rabbis. Right now, we're saying that he did not recognize the marriages that they performed and divorces and so on. And this has consequences about the issue of mamzerim. What would you call mamzerim in English?
Bastards.
Right? Who would then not be allowed to marry others and so on. And because he did not recognize the marriage, then they weren't halachically married. Therefore, later on, if they had children, the women had children with a different man, that would not make the children mamzerim. So could be two things that influenced him to make this halachic decision. One is because he was very opposed to the rabbis and their actions and considered what they did invalid, and also because that enabled us to be less harsh on a different end of the spectrum, where we're making decisions about mamzerim. And again, this is one of the cases where he was more lenient earlier on and more strict later on, apparently because the movements became made more and more, even more liberal decisions. He did not recognize conversions performed by conservative and reform for two reasons. First of all, because there is no commitment when they convert to keep mitzvot and halacha. And two, because the people who were performing the conversion couldn't be considered a beit din because he didn't recognize their halachic status as halachic authorities. And the people who converted are like non-Jews. And if he married a Jewish woman, she doesn't need a get. Not, I would give a get lechumra. Not, I would say, just to be safe, give her a get in case the conversion applies. He said, no get, because if we give a get, that means we're at least saying that maybe we're giving a maybe to the conversion. We're not saying no. So he wanted the absolute opposition, the absolute lack of recognition of the conversion to be clear, and therefore, even if this person who converted, reform or conservative, married a Jewish woman, there's no marriage, and she doesn't even need a get. By the way, this, I have to say, maybe I was not accurate in what I just said. This psak was given about a reform conversion. We can't say for sure that he would say the same about a conservative conversion. He did not allow the non-Orthodox movements to use, he would not allow them to use, he gave the instruction to Orthodox mikvahs, like a community or a shul that has a mikveh, not to allow non-Orthodox movements who are doing conversions to use the mikveh for their conversion.
But that doesn't
What?
That doesn't make sense.
Well, the reason is because their conversions are not valid. We don't want to first of all, we don't want to give support to something which is done wrongly. And second of all, we don't want to give the impression that we're recognizing these conversions.
Okay.
Rav Nachum Eliezer Rabinovich,
Okay.
who passed away a few years ago, was the Rosh Yeshiva here in Israel of Yeshivat Ma'ale Adumim. I don't remember the years. I'm guessing, maybe guessing in the 70s. There was an argument, public argument in Toronto where he was a rabbi about this issue, and he was opposed to the opposition. In other words, he was opposed to saying, we're not going to let you use the mikveh. They wanted to use the mikveh for conversions, and there were others who didn't allow them, and Rav Rabinovich opposed that. And what he wrote, I have it, it's in a book called Siach Nachum, which I have at home, and I often quote this psak because of the reasoning that he gave. He claims the following. First of all, I'll make, let's say, 3 points, unless I remember anymore. First of all, he said, it's too late now, meaning they've gone through a whole process and they're just waiting for the mikveh. At this point, to oppose it, you wake up too late. Second, he said, it's just a yetzer hara of picking fights. You're not really influencing anyone. You're just fighting about things. And
Right.
third, he said, the way to deal with reform and conservative actions that he would agree with Rav Moshe Feinstein. I think he would agree with Rav Moshe Feinstein that they are not valid halachically, conversions and other things, but the way to deal with it is to teach Torah and to teach more Torah and then to teach more Torah, meaning you believe in the Torah in a certain way. You have to bring that light to the world. You have to teach more. You have to get people to learn more Torah. That's the thing to do, and not to oppose what they're doing because you don't agree with it. So that was Rav Rabinovich, and on that specific issue, I am not aware. One second, let's go through a certain series, and then we'll get back to it, and then we'll open to discussion. Okay? So I'm not aware of Rabinovich expressing an opinion about or a difference of opinion on other issues. He also, Rav Moshe Feinstein, was opposed to any kind of cooperation. For instance, let's say renting a room. Let's say you have a new community and you don't have a building, you need a room to make a shiur. Okay, so you can go to Matan, or you can go lehavdil to a conservative or reform shul and rent a room in their venue. He says, no, don't do that. He compares it, and I want to be clear about this comparison. He is not saying that what they are doing is avodah zarah, is idol worshiping, but he compares it to a halacha regarding idol worshiping, that we don't go there, we steer far away from them, and we don't want to go there and use their facilities and things like that. That comparison he is making, and we'll discuss that very soon. Not to be buried in a conservative cemetery, not to work he didn't say not to work. He was he was not comfortable, was not favorable towards working in a conservative or reform community, to the level of not to the level of not being the rabbi there. Not only that, even just being a teacher there, or even just like being the secretary, being a person who takes care of the facility or things like that. He was opposed to that. If you needed it for parnasah, he gave a heter. If that was the way that you could make your provide for yourself, he gave a heter for that. But he considered it something that makes that person not worthy of a position in an Orthodox community.
Uh-huh.
Meaning you can't teach there and teach, even if you make an absolute condition that you will teach what you believe in. You go to a conservative reform community and you teach Torah with your beliefs, and they accept that you're going to teach and you're going to preach what you believe in. Even then, he said no. And if you do because that's what you need to do to provide for yourself, he would say then you can't teach in an Orthodox setting. And again, this is an expression of something that became harsh over time. Meaning in the beginning, in the earlier years, he was more lenient towards it or accepting, maybe not excited, but accepting, and later on became more harsh because the rift and the gap, the distance ideologically between the movements grew and became more harsh, and his opposition to them became more harsh. And one last thing about this, I would say the following. Generally speaking, the term I used at the beginning of mumar le'achis or mumar le'te'avon, I'll repeat it again. Mumar is someone who is a sinner. This is what he does. It's not, he sinned one time. He performs sins all the time. There are still two levels, two kinds. One is called in Hebrew mumar le'te'avon. Te'avon is having, being hungry, having a hunger for something. And mumar le'achis is doing something, again, we don't have a good word for this in English, doing something dafka, okay? Being a dafkanik. The example I gave was you have two food establishments, one next to the other. One is kosher, one is non-kosher. A person who is mumar le'te'avon, if there's no kosher place, he's going to go eat in a non-kosher place. It's not because he's doing dafka, he's hungry. And he's not going to wait, and he's not going to be patient, and he's not going to make an effort. So he's going to eat in a non-kosher place. But if there's a kosher place, he's going to go there. And if they're right next to one another, there's no reason for him to go to the non-kosher place. A person who's mumar lehachis, or as we say in Hebrew, lehachis, in Jewish terminology, it's lehachis. If there's a kosher place and a non-kosher place, he's going to go to the non-kosher place because it's dafka. So relating to non-religious people, not conservative reform, non-religious, lo datim, chilonim, they would usually be considered mumar le'te'avon. They don't care it's kosher or not kosher. They eat whatever they want, but they're not doing it dafka. It's not lehachis. Whereas sometimes the people, certainly the leaders of non-Orthodox communities or non-Orthodox leaders, he would call mumar le'achis. And this goes back to the comparison, again, not to idol worshiping, but to the same attitude of keeping far away from it, because it's an opposing attitude, meaning someone who's not religious is not religious, but he's not anti-religious. He's not suggesting a different religion instead of Judaism. It's not like Avodah Zarah in that way. I don't keep these laws. I don't believe in these laws, but I'm not suggesting something instead of traditional Judaism. Whereas people are conservative or reform, and certainly leaders, rabbis, conservative and reform rabbis, are suggesting something that is competition, that is going to not just say to people, well, you don't have to keep it, keep something else. It's competition. It's derailing. It's creating damage. It's destructive. It's not only passive, it's destructive. And this is the basis, and Rav Moshe Feinstein's attitude is generally accepted in Orthodox circles. I'm not going to say 100%. We are going to show a different opinion and raise the possibility of a different attitude, but it is generally accepted, and with the terminology, as we expressed before, using the term in Hebrew, rabbi, not harav, rabbi, for non-Orthodox rabbis, and you see, they thought 8:30. Hi.
What,
Uh,
30?
Shalom. We have moved, we're just saying we have moved to starting at 8, okay? We're in the middle here. Etta, you hear us?
Yeah, yeah.
We said probably some people weren't aware of the change, so
Oh, okay.
Okay,
So-
but
so look at the time when for the future. Thank you for being here. We're happy you're here. So we discussed at length a lot of details about Rav Moshe Feinstein's attitude towards non-Orthodox people and certainly rabbis, of total non-acceptance of what they do and what they represent, and considering them worse than people who are not religious. People who are not religious don't pose a threat, aren't acting in a way that's destructive towards traditional Judaism, whereas non-Orthodox movements and certainly leaders, he considers them to be doing something which is destructive, which is maybe even, I would say, aggressive, which is not just passive towards Judaism and not caring. It's causing, it can be dangerous to traditional Judaism, and therefore he saw it as a danger that we have to steer ourselves far away from it, not accept their actions, what their leaders do as halachically valid, and to keep a big separation, not cooperate with them, and so on. And this generally has been accepted in Orthodox circles in Israel. Before we move on, now is time for comments. Ilana, bevakasha.
I know from firsthand experience from the Masorti movement that for a long time the Masorti movement didn't have its own mikvaot, and they were using or attempting to use Orthodox mikvaot in different towns. And I had the experience of being with a group of people who had been through a conversion course in the Masorti movement. And the only place they could put these people was in the sea. You know, and we had the Beit Din in Netanya, which might not have been the best place to do that given the undertow that exists in the water. I can tell you from personal experience, but they could not get access to a mikveh, and they wanted to enable the people who went through everything in their course and went through the Beit Din from the Masorti movement. So we took them into the water in Netanya at the beach, far enough out so everything was modest and so on and so forth. The problem is that there is a serious undertow, and I will never forget this ever. One of the participants in the class, I think she was of Russian background originally. Her daughter was waiting for her on the shore, and she communicated with her daughter, like a 7-year-old or something, and told her, "Do not come out here." And the daughter misread it, and the daughter started going into the water. Now, I'm no great, athlete, and nor a great swimmer, especially with wet clothing on. But I ran like I've never run in my life to pick up this little girl and carry her back to the shore. And that's a consequence of not allowing fellow Jews to use the mikveh. And that's what I have to say.
I wanna, first of all, I hear what you're saying, and certainly the consequence of danger as a consideration. But I do want to raise, not necessarily to support everything that Rav Moshe Feinstein said, but to be critical of non-Orthodox movements about having this need, meaning if a mikveh is necessary, then you should have a mikveh. And if you don't need a mikveh, you
Mhm.
don't need a mikveh. So you kind of have to, decide, do you put in the necessary means to have a mikveh? Maybe you don't use it as much. Maybe you don't need it. Some places, men more than women. If you go to certain religious communities, it's the women who use the mikvahs. If you go to other religious communities, Orthodox communities, it's the men who use the mikveh every day and the women when they use the mikveh. But if nobody's using a mikveh, therefore you don't need a mikveh, then when you need a mikveh, there's something wrong about this. There's something missing here.
Well,
So
it
build a
costs
mikveh.
money.
You don't have to build a mikveh. You don't have conversions. You don't have converts every week, every day. But have a mikveh in a certain geographical area so that you can use it. Put in the money, build it properly. Have a mikveh of your own.
Right. Well, I have to say it was a big investment for the Masorti movement, and there are mikvaot today, but this
Mhm.
was
I was going to ask you,
this
there
was
are
at least a
mikvahs
decade ago, and there are
in
mikvaot
Israel.
in Israel in the Masorti movements, an Israeli movement. Otherwise, it's called conservative.
In towns, in certain yeshuvim.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly.
Like I
where-
know in the Galil, there's a conservative place, and I know in the Arava, there's a conservative place. So they might have their own mikvahs
Right.
in the
No, but I
settlement, in
think
a
there are a
kibbutz.
few. But all I can tell you is from that personal
Like
experience.
in all of central Israel, you'll find one.
I believe so.
You know.
Again, I'm not an expert, and I'm no longer involved with that aspect. So, um, what can I say? And I'm really too old for the mikveh.
No, and I'm not asking you to use it. I'm saying, but about. Or here's another example. Let's say we go to Harabait, okay? That's a different issue. But let me ask you, in America, do you know?
I used to know, but I also know that there was a lot more in Manhattan, at least. There was a fair amount of flexibility. I think the conservative movement did use Orthodox.
There was flexibility on the part of some, at least a few Orthodox communities, meaning not everyone, but there were those who enabled it. I'm asking, but were there conservative communities in North America who built a mikveh? We had their
That
own
also,
mikveh.
Yeah.
I believe so.
Yeah,
Look,
they did.
the conservative movement across the US is pretty diverse.
Yeah,
And but so in most major cities, there are conservative synagogues, no question. And some of them, not all of them by any stretch, have invested in a mikveh. But the Masorti movement here in Israel, certainly it was established many years after the conservative movement in the US. And like just like Kinor can't quite get a building going, neither, it's expensive in Israel to build anything.
yeah.
And so, I mean, if we had all the donors that we need at Kinor, we'd have a building of our own.
We're not at that stage. We're at the stage of getting permission from the area, but that's a different issue.
Yeah, but
We
I mean,
passed a
we wouldn't
certain.
even need the area to use that. We could just, have a parcel of land and build a shul. The
No, you
truth.
need a parcel. You need the area to have a parcel of land. That's the point.
Okay, but beyond that, in our case, Kinor is dependent on this whole building design and
So,
we don't have our own building. So
whatever. Let's not discuss Kino now. There's something happening, but let's not discuss it now. But okay. Other people want to comment. Yeah, Eliezer.
First of all, I just want to state a general principle that I think competition is good and not bad.
Okay.
But in the conservative movement, at least in Israel, is Torah abiding, and that they have. I mean, if you want to define a Jew as somebody who's committed to the Torah, it would be problematic in the very least to exclude the Masorti movement in Israel. Having said that, I think
Why do you say that?
I know a lot of conservatives who don't drive on Shabbat,
Okay,
who eat kosher food. I don't know their personal lives about the mikveh. And so, and in fact, it would seem to me that one would want people to go to the mikveh because that's one of the first things that might be dropped by somebody if it's too hard for them. I know in Chicago, when we live in Chicago, and Skokie was full of mikveh. In South Side, which is where the academics live.
Yeah.
There was one mikveh which barely could hold on, serving as many people as possible. And they never asked you which synagogue you go to.
No, that's a different story. You're talking about women using the mikveh.
Yeah.
We're talking about conversions.
I don't know about conversions.
But it's a
one thing I
different
do know
issue because
about
nobody in the mikveh asks questions of an individual who comes.
Right.
I can tell you a great story that a rabbi once told us about Friday night when they were at home having their Suda already. And the mikveh lady, as we call it, the balanit, as we call it in Hebrew, came to the rabbi's house because a woman dared on Friday night to come on her motorcycle and wanted to go to the mikveh. And she said, no way, you can't come on a motorcycle on Shabbat, go to the mikveh.
Wow.
And the rabbi told us the story is a rabbi whom today I find myself in serious disagreement with him, but I also have aspects of respect towards him. And when he told us the story in a certain setting, what he did is he told the lady to come sit down and he would talk with her, and asked his wife to go to the mikveh to enable this woman to use the mikveh, the woman who came on the motorcycle. Meaning these are two separate issues. You drive on Shabbat, you don't drive on Shabbat, and you want to use the mikveh. And he wanted her to have use of the mikveh. What we're talking about here is not an individual coming as a user of the mikveh, but a movement who wants to make a conversion. That's a different attitude of conversion, which is usually, it's true what Moshe Feinstein is saying, that it does. How much does it include mitzvot in certain setting? Maybe it's different in different conservative communities. That may be. Certainly in Reform, it doesn't include mitzvot and so on. And then they want to use the mikveh. I'm not saying the right thing to do is to say to them, no, but I can understand that there's some opposition.
But
It's
actually,
different. It's different than having a mikveh where women come and you don't ask questions who you are.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to get to a different point. I shouldn't have.
Okay, it's okay. Go ahead.
About conversions, and this still isn't the main point I want to get to, but about conversions, there's a big difference between a formal and a conservative.
Okay.
And you probably know about that already. I mean, I know of a reform conversion where essentially the person just went up to the rabbi, and the rabbi made him wait a while and said, "Okay, bless you, you're Jewish," or something like that.
Okay.
It's a world of difference. At least there's certain reform congregations
And in
the
certain
States.
conservative.
And that's right.
Yeah.
Now,
As I said, one of the changes that Rav Moshe Feinstein himself went through was in the beginning saying about conservative conversions, check who the Beit Din is.
Yeah.
Maybe the Beit Din is valid. And later on, as I said, it moved farther away and you wouldn't accept it. Just across the line, you wouldn't accept it.
Well, the main point that I wanted to make is that in the 70s, there was the flee of Jews to the suburbs. It happened all the time, but especially, I remember when I grew up, Manhattan was becoming Manhattan of all places. The Jews were moving away because it wasn't safe in the streets and things like that.
Right.
And when they moved away, they would move to small communities. And there was a lot of competition between the conservatives and the Orthodox. And there was a danger to to Orthodoxy at that time, because there was a possibility that if enough Jews moved away from populated areas, that it would be impossible to keep Jewish customs the way they traditionally are kept. So this might have influenced his decisions. And
in my pages that I've prepared.
Yeah.
I have reached page 6.
Yeah.
And next is page 7, and a different 7, 8 is a different possible attitude. And page 9, 10, 11 is moving in the direction of what you're saying now, that there are reasons to understand the opposition and the tension between the movements and things like that. And we have to check today, is this appropriate? But okay, I hear what you're saying. That's part of it.
And it's way different from the situation here, where people choose. There, people had essentially to choose whether to be Jewish or not Jewish. And here everybody's Jewish, almost. A lot of people are Jewish, and so they choose which.
I certainly think this is a consideration, or look at the surroundings, look at the situation. What are the dangers? What are the advantages and the disadvantages at different times, different places? Absolutely. And maybe not, maybe even in the 70s, and well, he passed away in the early 80s, but maybe in the 60s and 70s, maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't, maybe we would or we wouldn't agree with Rav Moshe Feinstein, but it's different from today, and we have to consider it today. Not only study what he said and assume that we can copy paste it today, but also consider the possibility that the situations are different.
And finally, I think it's unfair to judge a rabbi according to certain practices and not according to other practices. For example, what about a rabbi who says that Haredim shouldn't serve in the army? You call him a
You've got a
rabbi?
lot of those.
In your shul?
I have an aliyah.
The army is called a chaplain.
I won't tell you who, but someone asked me about a certain controversial political figure. If he came to shul, would I give him an aliyah? My answer was, he's Jewish, yes. Then he asked, would you let him speak in shul? I said, no way.
That's a
One
different
thing to say he's a Jew, he can have an aliyah. He's a political figure, that's one thing. Even if I agree with him, maybe I wouldn't have him speak in shul, but someone I firmly, and is definitely in a very different direction of our congregation, I don't see a reason why we should have him speak in shul if he happens to fall in on us on a given Shabbat. But okay. And I still think there's a difference between someone, even though it's a different discussion, I think, Eliezer. I understand your opposition. I feel very strongly with you on the opposition to let alone a chief rabbi who takes his public position and comes out with these statements against serving in the army. And we get very we get fired up about it very easily. I'm saying myself as well. Just discussing with my wife today, we were saying, there are certain attitudes in the world and in the rabbinic world that I disagree with, but I can understand they have a point. I can understand that you're afraid of yeshiva boys serving in the army. If that's your point, I can identify with that, or at least understand it to a certain point. But to say that the Torah says not to serve in the army, the term I used was, it's a lie.
Exactly.
It's
not there.
You can give other reasons why not, and we can discuss it. But to say that the Torah says not to serve in the army, that's just flat wrong. It's a lie. But at the same time, I would think there's a difference between an individual's, the way he handles himself, the disrespect with which the disrespect he shows to others, including to me, and other things like that. And I think it's very wrong, and it's not worthy of respect and things like that. At the same time, it's not the same thing as a person saying, exclaim, having his hashkafa, his outlook is that certain parts of what I think of as Torah and halacha, that he says they're not, and we have to cross them off and do things in a different way. I think is an even more basic distinction that sometimes draws a line at places where you say we can't have this in our
Would
community.
you give Rav Gedanken and Aliyah?
Rav
What's his
Golinkin.
name? Sorry, Golinkin.
Rav Gustavo had an aliyah by us.
Okay.
Okay, and that's me. I'm not saying, but I'm saying I would still think the distinction is different, and we'll get to another attitude. And I would like to ask Rav Gustavo about mikvahs in Israel. Maybe I'll have a chance to ask him.
Mhm.
Mark,
Two comments. I'm not sure I have the entire drift, but one, I mean, it seems to me a very extreme point of view. So I have two questions. One is, does he essentially consider people in the conservative and reform movements essentially not Jewish? Because that sort of sounds like what he's saying, firstly. And secondly, how orthodox is Orthodox?
meaning of the question?
Well, there are ranges of orthodoxy. How orthodox does one have to be to satisfy his level of orthodoxy? And if you're not there, are you? It seems like he's drawing a complete line. I'm not even going to talk to you. I'm not even going to allow people to talk to you. We give the example that you wouldn't allow a person to even teach in a conservative milieu, even though that person himself is teaching the Torah that he believes in.
Right.
So that means you can't even communicate to them. That's crazy.
Okay, the first question, absolutely, the answer is an absolute no, meaning he does not say that people are not Jewish. Definitely not. The converts are not Jewish. But the people who were born Jewish, doesn't matter how they were raised, what their hashkafa is, of course they're Jewish. There are two major focuses of opposition. One is the leaders, and the other is the establishments, the building of the community, of the synagogue, the school, things like that. No cooperation there. Not zero cooperation with an individual as a person, not a person comes and I wouldn't consider, not someone else, a person who's a member of a reform community came to an Orthodox rabbi and got married, the marriage is valid. That's a different case. The establishment, the authorities are acting in ways that are not valid halachically. You don't accept the conversions, the marriages, everything else. Don't cooperate with the movements as movements. Yes, it's very harsh. Even that, as I said before, there is a point where he says, if it causes too much of a rift, and I don't know where he would draw the line, but there is a point where he would say to prevent a certain rift, I would say accept a certain person and show him respect, meaning give him an aliyah. To which I said, everything is causing a rift and we have to do that much earlier, but at least he's saying, I draw the line at a certain point. But no, that absolutely not about the individuals. This is about the movement, the leaders, establishment. To your second question, I would say it's a question of what you proclaim. Meaning, if you say, I accept Orthodox as Torah, I don't keep it myself for whatever reason, because I don't believe in it, because then I don't know what you mean by you accept it, but because I don't have koach for it. It's too detailed. They should make changes. They should be more modern. They should serve in the army. Whatever it is, the reason you say why you don't practice it, or you say I'm trying as much as I can.
I'm sorry.
Then I won't say, okay, I think you should be the religious leader of the Jewish people, but you would certainly say you're trying to be a good Jew. I accept that. Whereas here, and that's what I said before about the difference in the attitude towards someone who's non-religious, says I don't believe in the Torah, I don't believe anything, I don't care about Orthodox, conservative, or reform. I don't care about Orthodoxy. I don't believe in anything. And he would say you're a Jew who was did not get, maybe even you had religious education, but for whatever reason you didn't accept it. But you're not being detrimental, you're not being destructive towards traditional Judaism. Whereas when you take up an active position, which is different, which is saying halakha is different, has been changed, we're doing things differently, that is being destructive and you're causing a danger, and that's where he draws the line. And I would say there are other places where rabbis use this kind of assertion, where you say someone is acting in a certain way which is not according to halakha. That's one thing. A person is creating a movement, not conservative or reform, about something else, about a change, about something that was not accepted in the past, and he wants to be accepted today. He acts in a certain way. That's one thing. He creates a movement. He does propaganda. He gathers people to teach them his new way. That's different. That's something that you would say there's a difference. So how orthodox do you have to be? It's not an individual, again, it's similar. It's not an individual question. It's a question of, are you acting? Are you being active in something which is changing or against orthodoxy, or are you just not being orthodox yourself? That's a big difference, friend.
Thank you.
Tova, you wanted to say something?
No, I think you already, I heard it. I got the answer. Thank you.
Okay, it's a little late, but we started a little late. Let me give at least an opening of a different attitude. As I said, in 3 weeks, in 2 weeks is Hanukkah. In 3 weeks, we'll meet again. Rav Yaakov Ariel actually accepts this position. Rav Yaakov Ariel was the rabbi of Ramat Gan, was a Rosh Yeshiva, was a leading figure in Tzionut Datit in Israel, not in the political party, in the attitude of religious Zionism in Israel. Hi, Michael. And he is not part of the he's not part of the more open, more modern Beit Hillel kind of religious leadership establishment within religious Zionism, but he is also not at the other extreme, very against all kinds of things, and he actually writes about this. And the person who wrote, we are actually following along the booklet that I've shown you in the past by Arav Ronen Luvitz. He's the rabbi of Moshav Nir Etzion, on the way off the road on the way to Haifa, and he says, if you look at the logic of why to consider someone who's not religious, what we called before a mumar leteavon, a person who performs sins, but it's not because he's against the Torah, it's because he doesn't keep things carefully, or he's not, if he has something kosher, he'll eat the kosher. If he doesn't have it, he'll eat something not kosher, but he's not actively trying to act against Torah. And the reason is because the reason we have this attitude is because it's done unintentionally. It's because they didn't have a good Jewish education and things like that. I'm not saying we have to accept this attitude, but this is the reasoning of this attitude. And therefore, he's saying, if a person grew up, let's say in North America, just as the example of the place where these movements are the strongest, and was not raised Orthodox and was raised or grew up without Jewish education, and then someone is throwing them a line, offering a conservative community or connection to Reform community, they're not doing this because they are mumar lehachis, because they want to dafka be against traditional Judaism. They're doing this because they don't know any better. And maybe, as you say, they live in far out places and this is what they have there. Maybe they were never offered anything different. Maybe the Orthodox is drifting too far away from the modern life that they know. So or the modern life is moving away from Orthodoxy. And so in beliefs, in values, in practice, so it's hard for them to connect to it. So if you use this attitude towards people who are non-religious, Rav Luvitz is claiming, therefore, even more so about people who are within non-Orthodox communities. So we shouldn't. So there's reasoning to say this should be the attitude, rather than the more harsh attitude of Moshe Feinstein. And what Rav Ariel wrote is that he differentiates, he explicitly makes this differentiation between the movement and the people, and he's very explicit, and it's important to him to make this distinction between his attitude towards a person who is non-Orthodox as an individual, and who he says is the same thing as a person who's non-religious, and he has the same attitude of, this is what he knows, he doesn't know better, and so on. And we totally accept him and maintain the togetherness of the Jewish people in that sense. Whereas the movement and the establishment, as I was saying before, he would accept of Moshe Feinstein's attitude. So it's somewhere, he's accepting Rav Moshe Feinstein's attitude where it comes to the establishment and the movements and the leaders and the ideology. Towards the individual layperson, he's being very clear and making it as an important point to say, obviously, we accept the people who are Jewish as Jews and so on. So this is a different attitude, which we gave a lot of attention to Rav Moshe Feinstein's attitude, which is the main thing we did today. But I'm at least saying that there's a different attitude, and next time, 3 weeks from now, Rav Luvitz, we will follow him, giving more further reasoning for making an even stronger movement towards how we look at in a more mild way, towards how we look at conservative and reform movements. Tova, bevakasha.
Yeah, I think that maybe we can say that these people who don't know, maybe they're like a Tinok Shenishba. It's not that.
That's the term that he uses. You're right. That's exactly the term that he uses. I will explain to everyone the term Tinok Shenishba in Hebrew literally means a baby who was taken captive, meaning if a Jewish kid is born and then is kidnapped, we know that we live in this reality, was kidnapped and raised, and these things happened in the world, not with terrorists, with armies, with all kinds of things. Or what is the term called in Russia? What were they called? The children who were taken from Jewish communities as youngsters for the army.
Hold on 1 second. It's going to come to me.
We're both looking for the term. That's right.
Yeah. All right.
They were raised without any Jewish community, any Jewish surrounding, and so on.
Cantonese.
Cantonisti. Yes, exactly. And then when they got too old for the army, so they sent them home. They came back to the Jewish community. They knew nothing. So this is the Tinok Shenishba. This is the term of Tinok Shenishba, meaning it's not a person who's against Judaism. He doesn't know he's Jewish. He wasn't taught anything about Judaism. How is he supposed to know about Shabbat or Kashrut or Mikveh or anything else? So that's exactly what Rav Ariel says about the individuals, and what Rav Luvitz will say. Let's see, should this be our attitude to the movement as well, which we will discuss next time we meet 3 weeks from now. Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so we start at 8. We go from 8 to 9. Okay.
And tell your husband that you were late today, and he's even later. Terrible thing. Anyway, take care. It's good to see you. Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank
We're sorry.
you.
We accept you. You didn't know better.
It's good to see everybody.
Now you
It's good to
do.
see everybody.
Yeah, for next time you do. No excuses.
Okay.
Okay. Bye. Good night. Bye.
Laila tov.
לילה טוב, תודה רבה.